Hello, another week and another not particularly good week if you're in the royal family, given everything that appeared in last Sunday's papers, the allegations concerning an aide to Prince Charles. So all in all, if you're the Queen and you're in Balmoral right now, not a great time, I would say. Would you agree, Lizzie?
Yeah, I think I would agree. I said at the end of last week's podcast, I don't know what we're going to talk about in this week, but the Sunday papers brought with them some troubling headlines, I would say.
Yes, there is always something to talk about with this lot, and it doesn't matter what it is or when it happens or what time of year it is, there is always a development, sometimes good, sometimes not so good, as in the case this week, and we will bring you all the latest that we know about Michael Fawcett, Prince Charles's former aide, one-time valet who was, until last weekend at least, the chief executive of his charitable arm. There were other things happening as well, of course, and we are looking forward in a couple of days' time as we record this podcast to a new development in the legal proceedings of Prince Andrew. So whilst we're talking about things not being particularly good for the royal family, there's another potentially reputational damaging event.
Yes.
Yes, I will bring you details of those. So welcome to the Royal Rota podcast. It's all fun and games here this week. Your weekly podcast from ITV News on all things royal, where you can catch us on YouTube if you're watching. Hello, you can see us in this fine studio where we are now. Or if you're listening on your podcast while you're out running or doing other important things, hello in your ear. I hope you can hear us loud and clear.
Shall I start with a rundown?
Lizzie's got her rundown. If you're not, what is the word? Au fait. If you're not a regular listener and viewer and don't know what Lizzie does, there's something called the Robinson's Royal Rundown, named because it's a rundown. It's done by Lizzie Robinson and it's about all things royal. So the Robinson's Royal
Very
Rundown.
good alliteration that we came up with.
Some time ago, I believe.
Some time ago, yes.
So the Robinson's Royal Rundown is coming at ya.
So, top of the rundown this week, as you mentioned, Michael Fawcett has temporarily stepped down amid allegations he offered to help secure an honour for a Saudi businessman, and that broke at the weekend in two of the Sunday newspapers here. Prince Andrew, he is back at Balmoral with his mother, the Queen, and he is there ahead of a first hearing in the case brought against him by Virginia Giuffre. The Duke of Cambridge, he is back in doing royal duties today after a summer break, and he is marking 999 Day here in the UK. And there was a story in the Telegraph at the end of last week, I think, that he intervened to help get an Afghan family out of Kabul in Afghanistan, which was a nice story that we can bring you from the Telegraph. Prince Charles, talking about Afghanistan, he has hailed the Parachute Regiment for their role in helping to get British and also Afghan civilians out of Kabul. And Camilla has become patron of Nigeria's first sexual assault referral clinic.
Which is a very important piece of work and that she's done a lot of work on. Now, I was writing the list as you were giving that, thinking, oh yeah, what happened this week? Yes, I remember doing that. I remember that one.
I write the list in advance and Chris just wings it, basically.
Come in here and go, what happened again? No, I should know, or I just should put my phone on silent. I should know because we were doing the Michael Fawcett story last Sunday. It was a Sunday and it was one of those days that you could call a day off ruined by news developments. Nevertheless, that's what we get paid to do, to bring you the news, even if we're on a day off, which we were on that day. So we'll bring you to the Fawcett developments. One thing you could add to your list was an article in the Australian media about Kate and whether or not she's disappeared.
I mean, I didn't mention it because it's such a load of nonsense.
I suspect it is a load of nonsense. It just some members of the Australian media asked me about it.
I think they just used a quiet period to stir up trouble.
Yes,
but we can talk about it.
Are they divorced? Is she pregnant?
Where's Kate?
Where's Kate? Is she ill? Probably the answer is much more boring than that. It's probably Kate had the summer off with her kids, like plenty of mums do.
Yeah, and we haven't seen much from Prince William either, so although he's back at work today.
He's definitely not pregnant.
Exclusive.
Right, let's begin, shall we, on Michael Fawcett. So what do I need to tell you about Michael Fawcett? He was a former footman, actually, someone who joins the staff of the royal household back in the 1980s, to give you an idea of how long he's been in gainful employment with the royals. He was then a senior footman. He became a valet to Prince Charles. We had a debate this week, didn't we? Valet or valet?
We did.
Because if you valet your car or valet your car?
Well, I think it's valet for if you serve somebody like Michael Fawcett did.
Yeah.
But I think you valet a car.
You valet. But then somebody else told me that they say valet a car. We should, I know it's a French word, but we are in the UK, so we should anglicise it. But anyway, I'm probably getting distracted. But valet or valet was what Michael Fawcett was to Prince Charles for some time. Someone that Prince Charles once famously said he could do without almost anyone apart from Michael Fawcett, to give you an idea of quite how reliant the prince, the future king, was on this particular individual. Anyhow, he later went on to become the chief executive of what's known as the Prince's Foundation. That's a organisation that runs various charities on behalf of Prince Charles. It's based at Dumfries House in Scotland, a place we've been to, and I can say, if you are ever thinking of going, well worth a visit. I think it's free, so I'm not actually doing the royal family's job of trying to earn some money, so you can get in for free. And he was the chief executive of the Prince's Foundation until, that is, the foundation was approached by a couple of newspapers last weekend, presented with these allegations about getting donations for the Prince's Foundation in return for some help with honours / a knighthood. And that's why he stepped down temporarily pending an investigation. Is that a rough summary of Michael Fawcett between 1981 and now?
That is a rough summary.
Let's talk about these issues here. So we are talking about a very wealthy Saudi businessman who was giving donations to the Prince's Foundation, and like any charity, a foundation needs money, it needs donors, and often those donors are wealthy people. But he also was in receipt of an honour. He was, because he's from Saudi, he's not a Brit, he gets an honorary CBE or MBE or OBE. Michael Fawcett allegedly offered to help augment this, or upgrade, I think was the word he used in this letter that found its way into the Mail on Sunday last week, as well as allegedly assisting him with his application for British citizenship.
Yeah, and the letter that was published in the Mail on Sunday said the applications would be made in response to, quotes, the most recent and anticipated support of the trust. Yes, so
there are laws against selling or buying honours, abusing the honours system, which we have in this country, where you become a knight or a Commander of the British Empire, or you get an Order of the British Empire, or an MBE, what's MBE? Member of the British Empire. And there is a law that was passed in 1925, no less, which forbids the sale or the purchase of an honour. Let's bring you an interview that we did with a former MP, actually a former government minister, and now an author on royal finances. He's called Norman Baker. According to him, what he read in the papers was a clear breach of this law, and which is why he has asked the Metropolitan Police to look into it. Have a listen to what Norman Baker has to say, and then we'll also talk about another referral that the police received this week on this very matter.
The letter is entirely transactional and making it clear that support for a future upgrading of the honour already received by this Saudi person to something even grander, and the support for citizenship is dependent almost upon money coming into Charles's good causes.
But isn't that how honours work? People do good things, they help charities, and someone then writes a letter to say, we think you should consider this guy for an honour.
There's a difference between someone doing a good job and then someone independent looking at the situation saying this person's done quite a lot of good stuff. That's one thing. It's quite different to have an arrangement whereby the linkage is so obvious that the honour will not be forthcoming unless the money is forthcoming.
What are you hoping that Cressida Dick will do with your complaint?
The Metropolitan Police should look at the evidence of that letter in particular, and indeed the entire practices employed by Prince Charles and St James's Palace, because I believe corruption is involved. Whether intentional corruption or other corruption, it is corruption. They need to look at that seriously. They need to do so without fear or favour. Everybody is equal before the law, and they should not be put off by the fact that Prince Charles is involved.
So he was certainly very clear about what he thinks has happened. These are his claims, by the way. It's for the police to decide whether or not they think there has been a breach of any particular law or any criminality involved here. They tell us, the Metropolitan Police have told us this week, they are assessing those requests to look into this matter, and not only from Norman Baker, but another request came in from
Graham Smith, who heads up the anti-monarchy group Republic. They also wrote to the Metropolitan Police, and the Met said that they have received the letters. They are assessing the information alongside the media reports.
And the application that went into the police from Republic, as Lizzie says, it's the organisation that campaigns for Britain to have an elected head of state rather than a constitutional monarchy. They referred not just Michael Fawcett to the police, but also Prince Charles to the police as well. That's just, some people might call that a particular stunt. Some people might say, well, that's fair enough because these two men worked very closely together. So if you investigate one, you need to investigate both. Either way, those requests have gone into the Metropolitan Police in London, and they are now assessing them. Separately to that, there is an investigation going on by the trustees of the Prince's Foundation, as well as an auditor from a big accountancy firm to look into exactly what was said and when. This letter apparently was written in 2017, when Michael Fawcett was then the sort of head of the Dumfries House Trust, which later became the Prince's Foundation, and he became the chief executive. So
we approached Michael Fawcett for comment this week.
Yes.
And
is it worth having a look at those pictures?
Yeah, we can show you those pictures actually of him leaving and arriving back at his house. He was off to walk the dog, but he had no comment when reporters asked him various questions about the allegations. And
have a quick listen then to Michael Fawcett leaving his house and being asked those questions.
Morning, sir. Did you secure honours for cash? Any comment on the revelations in newspapers the last couple of days, sir?
So you would have heard silence from Michael Fawcett there, which is, of course, his right. No, some people on Twitter were accusing us, broadcasters were there, as well as some stills photographers, were accusing us of harassing him at his private home. I would put it differently. I would say that we were asking him legitimate questions politely from a public road. I think it's important to clarify that.
Yeah, definitely. We should also say that Clarence House this week said that the Prince of Wales has no knowledge of the alleged offer of honours or British citizenship on the basis of donations to his charities, and fully supports the investigation now underway by the Prince's Foundation.
And it's also worth saying that the Saudi businessman who's called Mahfouz Murray Mubarak bin Mahfouz is not accused of any wrongdoing in this matter. And Michael Fawcett himself, as you heard, is given a chance to answer questions. He didn't, but he's also stood down temporarily. And the Prince's Foundation say that he fully supports their investigation and will assist it fully.
Yes, I think we've done all the statements. But I mean, these allegations come a week after reports that wealthy donors could pay to secure dinner with Prince Charles and a stay at Dumfries House, and fixers were potentially taking up to 25% of the fee.
Yes.
So it's been 2 weekends now of quite difficult headlines.
Difficult headlines. I mean, I suppose I would say, because I think it's important to clarify that every charity needs money. Every charity holds like kind of gala dinners where you pay for a seat at a table, knowing that excuse me, knowing that money is going to go to the charity. There can't be much different, like come and have dinner with Prince Charles, he'll be there, he might give a speech, but you've got to pay £12,000. I mean, that's not unusual, and that happens with lots of charities. It's what a lot of these charity gala evenings are often about.
And I don't think anyone is questioning that you know, Prince Charles himself has been an incredibly successful fundraiser. He has done amazing work for not only charities, but his Prince's Trust has done amazing work for thousands of thousands of young children. How do they get the money?
I mean, they don't get the money from rattling tins on the street. They get the money from very wealthy donors.
And, you know, we spoke to Hugo Vickers, the historian, at the weekend. He said, you know, this money is not, you know, Charles isn't putting it into his pocket. He's using it for good causes. But I think what's troubling is that, you know, we're talking about the future king here, and the way that he, you know, the people that he surrounds himself with and the way that he makes money for those charities, that's what's being called into question here. And, you know, that it's his reputation?
I think it's very complicated because obviously what the Prince of Wales is doing with the money is extremely good. The question really is as to whether or not the sources of the money are the right places for it to come from. And that's a very difficult question. I mean, nobody is suggesting that Prince Charles is taking this money for his own advantage. I mean, he is actually doing a lot of very good work at Dumfries House. The real question is how careful he should be with where the money comes from. And I know that Buckingham Palace are very, very careful about these things. I think he is rather less careful. In that case, it is slightly damaging.
So yes, I mean, actually, we've been to Dumfries House and seen some of the work there. Remember, Dumfries House itself was a house that Prince Charles raised the funds to buy for the nation, opened up the entire estate, lets people in the local community, which is actually quite a challenged community around Dumfries House, a former mining area. Opened it up for free, planted an arboretum, built educational classes for local school kids so they can learn how vegetables grow and all the rest of it. A lot of good work goes on there. I don't think anyone is denying that. This is about whether or not the law has been broken in promising to help someone with an honour or a knighthood in return for donations to the charity. So Prince Charles himself actually was at Dumfries House, wasn't he?
He was. He is there today doing an engagement. We're recording on Thursday. This will go out on Friday, but he's there doing engagement today. But as yet, we've heard nothing from him sort of over the last couple of days on engagements talking about this, nor would I expect us to.
Yes, they do a few engagements in the same sort of area, and a lot of their engagements, they've said Prince Charles and Camilla have been in Glasgow this week, haven't they? They also were at Dumfries House where they were honouring the Prince's support of knitting. Unveiled, have a look at this, unveiling a rather large, what would you call it, tapestry or?
Tapestry, yeah.
Quilt or something.
Tapestry, I
yeah,
reckon.
okay. Unveiling that, but nothing from him other than through his office on this particular issue of Michael Fawcett. But yes, he has actually resigned a couple of times before. He was cleared of financial misconduct when he was nicknamed Fawcett the Fence for selling royal gifts, unwanted royal gifts. That was something that happened in the early 2000s, but he was cleared of financial misconduct. He had resigned from his post at the time, though. But later, obviously, kept working for the Prince. And there's all this talk about he's the one that squeezes the Prince toothpaste. So isn't that sort of linked to something when the Prince had a broken arm and he needed someone to put paste on his toothbrush?
I think so.
And that was Michael Fawcett who did that. I mean, you know, that just gives you an indication of actually these men were actually, they worked, you know, very closely together for a long period of time.
As you said earlier, you know, Charles has said in the past he could do without almost anyone apart from Michael Fawcett. That shows you just how close they are. And he obviously, you know, Michael Fawcett has raised a huge amount of money for Dumfries House and good causes. But
I mean, there's charitable donations to go towards these charities that do a lot of good work.
But there have been questions this week as to whether this might be, you know, this might cause a final separation for Charles and Fawcett.
Is this the issue over which these two men will have to go their separate ways? We could continue to talk about other difficult news for the Queen, and we will, but we opened last week on Prince Andrew, and we will give you a full update on everything that's been going on there. However, let's just say that William is back at work, Kate not. So these Australians that were writing this story about Kate disappearing / getting divorced / getting pregnant will have more to write about because she wasn't with her husband today. However, we fully expect the Duchess of Cambridge to return to work as soon as her kids go back to school. And actually, we say to return to work. I mean, there's public-facing work. There's a lot of work that they do, as we do, as plenty of people do behind the scenes that aren't public-facing.
Yeah.
Meetings, you know, organising all sorts of things.
And you know, you only have to look at the work that Kate has done around early years. She is incredibly well informed on that, and she does work
don't do that in the morning, do you? You do that, you do that over a long period of time.
But equally for both Kate and for William, you know, they have always wanted to balance their work with their family, and you know, the children have been off school, and
there's three of them.
And there's three of them, and the children are as much a priority for them as their work.
Some people might be pushing that there might be four of them, or that you know. Anyway, this is just one report that we saw that I don't think has very much credibility. I could be eating my words if they come back and tell me something. But anyway, I'll stick my neck out and say that I don't think there's anything in it. We've spoken a lot about Afghanistan, actually, and Prince William did reach out to help someone who was, like many, many thousands of people, desperate to leave Afghanistan since the takeover of the Taliban. Prince William, as you may well know, was previously in the armed forces, he was in the RAF, and he was trying to secure the exit from Afghanistan of someone that he knew from Sandhurst, from his officer training at Sandhurst. Yeah,
they were struggling to get safe passage out of the country, so Prince William asked his equerry to put in some calls on his behalf and help his family leave the country.
And and there were plenty of people who were doing that. We should point out, if you know someone there who is desperate to leave, and there were many people who sadly couldn't leave. But there were. I remember the head of the armed forces was talking about how he had interpreters that he wanted to get out as well. So. And I'm sure many levers were being pulled. I mean, it's a desperate situation all round, and we hope that that particular individual and their family are safe. Some people wanted to publish the name, which I don't think would be particularly helpful, given that there is speculation about what the Taliban might do if they find out these names.
Yeah, and we should say that the family were eligible to leave the country, but they sort of fell foul of the chaotic scenes on the ground that you saw in the pictures coming out of Afghanistan.
We call it Emergency Services Day. In the US, they might call it First Responders Day.
Yeah.
But either way, that is today, isn't it, or this week?
He's marking it.
He's marking it.
With a visit to
however long the day is or the month is, he's marking it.
He's marking it with a visit to a fire station. So, emergency responders. Prince William, we know, spent time in serving as an air ambulance pilot. So this is something that's incredibly close to him. So.
Yes. Buzzing phone, which means there's a message, an important one. I'm just going to read it while you're here, and it's not important. So let's talk about...
Just circling back to Afghanistan, Charles, in his role as Colonel-in-Chief of the Parachute Regiment, and they were involved in helping with what's called Operation Pitting, which is helping evacuate British and also Afghan civilians from Afghanistan. Yes. And he wrote a letter hailing them an outstanding credit to the country for their involvement, and he said he could not be more proud of their work.
There was also, I just leave the royals to one side, there were some pilots speaking over the weekend about the kind of scenes they were seeing at the airport, like landing planes when there was like a busload of evacuees on the runway. I mean, the chaos there and the kind of... I think the kind of trauma they must have witnessed as well in seeing desperate people trying to flee must have been quite something. So I think we'll all agree with Charles in giving the Paras a pat on the back. I should tell you, breaking news, that the Princess Royal and the Countess of Wessex have joined forces to visit the Westmoreland County Show this afternoon. Oh. Did you know that?
I didn't, because I didn't pick up my phone.
It wasn't on your list, was it? So I can exclusively tell you that it was announced that the Countess has become patron of the Addington Fund, a charity which supports agricultural communities by providing, such a long sentence, by providing affordable housing. We are
literally so up to date. We are bringing you
up-to-date breaking news.
Press releases as they fall.
But by the magic of podcasting, we will show you the pictures of these right now, because whilst we are recording this, we can predict that there will be some pictures, and those pictures will be put over my voice as I speak in time for the podcast going out as it does every week on Friday morning. Magic.
Magical.
Just magical, isn't it? Together, the Princess and Countess viewed horse, cattle, sheep and dog displays. Well, you kind of would at a county show, wouldn't you? And visited the food hall. There we go. Breaking news from Anne and Sophie.
Anne and Sophie. There we go.
I can't think of the job that Anne and Sophie have done before together, can you? No, probably there are, but I just can't think.
Just the two of them, I'm not sure. But they all came together, didn't they, last year to mark... Lots of the family came together last year to mark International Nurses Day.
A couple of families coming together. There is, yes, the family has come together to pay tribute to Prince Philip. Oddly, though, so this is something that's on a television channel called BBC something, isn't it? BBC. Mm. Anyway, so all the family and I think some grandchildren have all paid tribute to him. But this was a programme that started as a tribute to him for his 100th birthday.
Yeah.
And has been repurposed, I think, as it was put to me, to reflect on his service following his death in April.
Yeah, and I think what has particularly interested people is that it will
Here's
include...
my segue. So we've gone from family together to this piece of news about the programme to a certain individual taking part in this programme.
Ah, this is the segue.
Yeah, getting there?
Yeah, I'm getting
this
there.
This individual
okay.
is called Prince Andrew. He's taken part in this programme, which has led people to make the accusation, well, you found time to appear in a BBC programme, but you haven't found time to talk to the lawyers for Virginia Giuffre.
Or the FBI.
Or the FBI. Because he's in Balmoral.
Well, he's back at Balmoral. So he went to Balmoral where the Queen is spending her summer holiday, as usual. He went there in August, spent some time there, came back to Windsor, where he lives at Royal Lodge, and he has just returned back to Balmoral. We're told that that visit was planned. He'd planned to spend two parts of the summer there, but the timing has raised some eyebrows because the first time he went was just after he was sued by Virginia Giuffre. The second time is just ahead of the hearing on Monday the 13th.
Now, we can't bring you these pictures because we don't, as we've explained before, we don't use paparazzi photography because, you know, there's generally, if the more people use it, the greater the market for it, and therefore it's encouraging some practices which will lead the media to be criticised, as they were quite rightly over Princess Diana, etc. So, why don't we have pictures of Prince Andrew? Because we don't use paparazzi photography. But we can tell you that paparazzi photographers have photographed him arriving at Balmoral, but also inside a lodge. In Scotland, they call them a bothy. A bothy? It's kind of like a lodge in the hill.
It's like a wooden. It's sort of a wooden hut in the on the estate, isn't it?
Is it a Scottish word or is it more of a, I don't know. Anyway, a bothy. Bothy. There's a wooden one which the Queen likes, which the Swiss.
Well, they're sort of all over.
Yes,
kind of the Balmoral estate. There's not just one, but
we've seen them actually.
We have seen some of them, but there is one that the Queen, we were told on a tour that she particularly liked, and it was given to her by the Finnish. It's called the Honka Hut. We're not sure if that's the bothy they were at, but it looks very similar to one we saw on our tour. So
the Honka Hut, which the Finnish provided for the Queen. Prince Andrew has been seen there. I have to say...
We think it was that one, yeah.
Well, I have to say, so this picture is in the paper, and clearly we look at it, as you would. It's not a very good picture of Andrew, and wherever these photographers are, they're kind of hiding in the bushes in order to get these long lens photographs. And people might say, well, you know, tough luck, Prince Andrew, you're facing some very serious allegations. Put up with it. I can imagine that the Queen will be finding that rather disconcerting, that there are photographers clambering all over her Balmoral estate.
Well, she sees Balmoral very much as somewhere she goes to spend private time, private holidays, time away from her public-facing role, and it's sort of one of her most beloved places and times of her year.
She cherishes those time off.
She does. And
you might therefore say, and here I'm just being devil's advocate, well then don't invite your son Prince Andrew, who's accused of some very serious allegations, if you didn't want photographers to be at Balmoral.
It's also, for the Queen, it's the first time she's been there for her summer break since Prince Philip passed away earlier this year.
So, anyway, there's some pictures of Prince Andrew there. He is going to be there, we understand, on Monday. On Monday, the 13th of September, there is a court hearing in New York, a sort of, not preliminary hearing,
like a
procedural hearing in New York, where a judge will ask Virginia Giuffre's legal team, what's the latest on your lawsuit against Prince Andrew of the United Kingdom?
So,
thereabouts.
The lawsuit was filed on the 9th of August this year. When it was filed, Virginia's team have 120 days to get these papers to Prince Andrew. Otherwise,
which takes us up to December.
The 8th, I think.
Okay.
And
counted out 120 days on your calendar.
Someone else did for me.
Right,
and
okay, fine.
So they have 120 days. If they don't manage to serve the papers in that time, then the case could be dismissed, or they have to come up with a good reason as to why they haven't been served. Once they have been served to Prince Andrew, which they have to do in person, they can't go to his lawyers unless he nominates them as representatives. They have to go directly to him. He then has 21 days to respond to them, and we understand that he has not yet taken receipt of the papers.
So he hasn't taken a receipt of the papers. What I don't understand is why you can't just take the papers down to Blackfoot's, his solicitors in London, and say, here you go, please give these to your client.
Because of the Hague Convention, apparently. It has to go to him unless he nominates Blackfoot.
So you thought you were going to get this job as a royal correspondent. Actually, you have to be a legal expert.
A legal expert.
Because of the Hague Convention, it's apparently true that...
Oh, yes, there we are.
So you have to physically serve them. So they've tried to do this at Royal Lodge, which is in Windsor, where Andrew lives. That's his main house, where he lives with Fergie, Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York. And a couple of times the legal couriers were turned away at the gate, as opposed to the police saying, yes, come on in. He's just in the living room if you want to go and hand the papers over. One imagines, and we are speculating here, that in courts, Virginia Giuffre's lawyers will say to the judge, well, we've tried to serve these papers on him and we have as yet been unsuccessful.
Yep, I think that will be one of the questions for the hearing on Monday, is have you served them, and, you know, where they are in terms of the process so far.
Yes.
But, you know, Prince Andrew, he travelled from Royal Lodge to Balmoral by car. He didn't fly. He's done that both times now. He's
presumably by car, because then you're not exposing yourself to photographers at the airport.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there were pictures
drive. From
of...
Windsor to Aberdeenshire is an 8-hour drive or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, at least.
we were having a conversation earlier about, like, if you're Prince Andrew and you don't want to be seen by anybody, that's like not photographers and not papers, where do you stop for a comfort break on your way from Windsor to, which is slightly off topic, mind you, but it's you know, kind of...
We're really going there.
But where does one stop? Okay, another comfort break for a cup of coffee or anything. You can't.
Good old thermos flask.
You cannot stop at Starbucks on the M6
no.
when you're Prince Andrew. Just making that point.
Thanks.
It's a long way to go.
I'm not sure I want to go into.
Let's not go into it. No, what, the coffee options, you mean, yeah? The coffee options.
The coffee options.
Okay, maybe it has a flask.
A thermos flask, yeah. Good.
Right. Now, listen, this is not to make light of what is actually some very, very serious allegations facing Prince Andrew. And the fact that he's remained silent is a policy that his lawyers have asked him and his people to stick to. There's not been a whimper out of Prince Andrew since these allegations, since this lawsuit was filed.
No, it's gone completely quiet. There's been no statements from the legal team. There's been no statements from him directly.
And we understand
or his
that
press
policy
team.
will continue next week.
Yeah.
Now, we should also remind you that concurrently the civil case involving Virginia Giuffre suing Prince Andrew is running at the same time as the criminal investigation by the FBI. I'm sure the FBI will be watching the civil case very closely if it progresses in any meaningful way next week, and I rather doubt it will. So.
Yeah, and there have been some reports that Prince Andrew is buoyant and in a good mood, but we understand that is actually not the case at all.
And that is actually, he's in a really bad mood, which he kind of would be if that was your situation. You know, well, listen, let's look at it from both angles. You would be really fed up if this was your situation and you were completely utterly innocent.
Yeah.
And we should repeat here for legal reasons, has denied these claims. He said to the BBC Newsnight in that interview that he never even recalls meeting Virginia Giuffre, let alone the allegations that she accuses him of, which are very serious ones of sexual assault in London and in New York and on the US Virgin Islands in the Caribbean.
Yeah, vehemently denies, so we should include that.
Updates here next week on the court case. We will be following them. We actually have reporters there. We have reporters here. So we will bring you a full update when we have it.
Yes. Anything else? Yes. One more thing.
One more thing, she says. I'm looking at my list. Done that, done that, done that, done that. So, oh yes, one more thing. One more thing. The Duchess of Cornwall. So she has become patron of Nigeria's first sexual assault referral clinic. And this was a clinic that was founded in 2013. The Duchess first heard of their work in 2018. Remember, Charles and Camilla went for a visit to West Africa in 2018, and she sort of... I do. Now, why do I know that? They went to West Africa 2018, because was it immediately after Harry and Meghan? Yes. Australia, and we couldn't physically get from Australia to West Africa, although some reported do, or joined the tour halfway through or something. Anyway, Again, I digress. As you listening to this podcast, you will know that I am often accused of digressing.
It's hard to keep up with.
Yes.
But this centre, it's not only helped sort of more than 6,000 survivors, but what was staggering was the age range. The youngest person that they've helped is a 3-month-old baby, and that ranges right up to an 80-year-old woman, and it's really
shocking,
staggering, really. And they say that obviously the impact of the pandemic has made things worse. I think we've seen that here in the UK, but they
domestic
said that,
violence, which is another one of Camilla's core areas of work as well.
Yeah, she's actually opening a refuge centre today up in South Ayrshire in Scotland. But it is one of her sort of, domestic violence and sexual assault. It's one of the causes that she has worked very hard on to highlight the work of charities in the UK and across the world. Yeah. And she said that she was not only delighted to become patron, but she described them as a truly trailblazing organisation. And the vital work means that women no longer need to suffer in silence. And she was deeply grateful to the centre's staff and volunteers, and they are the Mirabel Centre in Nigeria. And
actually full marks to Camilla for all the work she does in this area, because, the lending her voice, her convening powers to this kind of work is very, very important indeed. I should just mention last week's podcast, if you haven't caught up with it, we actually caught up with some of the actors who take part in the Windsor's stage show, and one of our international colleagues from one of the international broadcasters came up to us the other day and said, I went to see it on your recommendation and I laughed and I laughed and I laughed.
Oh yes, so I was thinking who came up to us, but yes,
very much enjoyed it.
Yes, it's not on for much longer, so if you do want to go and see it, book tickets and watch our podcast from last week.
Yes, or listen to it, because if you tell you can listen to this podcast, you can watch it. It's quite unique in that way.
Yes.
There are other Royal podcasts, so we appreciate you either watching or listening to this one. And if the news is good or bad, and I think this week most people can agree that the news is rather negative as far as the Royals are concerned, because of the allegations surrounding Michael Fawcett and the allegations surrounding Prince Andrew. But we will not shy away from talking about them on this podcast, because we're in the business of news, and news is done in an impartial, fair and accurate way.
That's the aim.
Say to all the people who hate me on Twitter for on the Harry and Meghan matters. But anyway,
they haven't had a mention this week.
I just mentioned them.
you just mentioned them.
Almost got through a whole podcast without mentioning H or M. Yeah, we could probably edit this bit out and then lift it out.
Yeah, it's clever that. We can just nip it out.
Right, anyway, thank you very much for your continued company, and we will see you next week when we'll have all the latest on what happened in court with Prince Andrew and any other royal news, good or bad. You'll get them on this podcast. Thanks for your viewership and listenership. It's appreciated.